Hi, everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. If you enjoy this room, please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei got some sun in Florida that he's going to tell us all about later today. So can you please introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Lei. I am the co-host and former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 106. Let's start off with Tesla, maybe? Tesla Investor Day. Let me ask you, did it become the Tesla disappointing day? Did you watch the live stream?
I did not. So I spent this morning reading a little bit about it, but it's just a bunch of nothing burger. But if I'm an OEM legacy automaker, I've taken a lot of notes because they're talking about reducing costs by 50%. They're still talking about that 20 million unit number by 2030. They're talking about $175 billion worth of investment into capacity to get to that 20 million. So legacies haven't thought like this. Toyota sells 10 million units. Volkswagen sells 10 million units. We're talking about doubling this and doing it in the next 7 years. So that means, and I'm assuming that the factories are about half a million units each, okay? So that's another 35, 40 factories. And they need to happen, let's say, within the next 4 years, 5 years. So we're talking different level of understanding of the automotive space and a simplification because we're moving away from the petrol powertrain. But nonetheless, the legacies should be like, how is he coming up with this? And then trying to strategize and figure this out for themselves. That's how I looked at it.
That is exactly, you mentioned a cost. That is exactly one area that stood out to me. So I think the reason why I asked you it was disappointing because coming into this investor day, there was a lot of expectations of an announcement of a Model Q, Model 2, a cheaper entry level sort of Tesla.
Right.
That didn't happen. So I think there were a lot of disappointments on that front. But to me, I think three things stood out to me. I did watch the live stream. I watched it
the whole time?
I watched it, the first part of it, intermittently at my departure gate.
Oh, right.
And then the Q&A part of it on the plane. So luckily I flew JetBlue, which had free Wi-Fi, so it was perfect. The three things that stood out to me was when, at the very beginning, Elon said, a non-autonomous gas car is like riding a horse and using a flip phone. I LOL'd. So that I think they're still on this path to, electrification, they've already done it, but autonomous, right? A lot of question marks. So that's number one. And then number two is what you talked about. 50% reduction in cost in next generation platform is what they announced, but not the upcoming vehicle.
Right.
That should scare the bejesus out of all the legacies and every other competitor for that matter. And they revealed the Mexico Giga, which will produce that.
Well, so to your point, Lei, they did have an announcement, but the president of Mexico stole Elon's thunder, basically.
Yeah. Well, the official announcement came later. So, but yeah, that's number two, the 50% production cost. And then number three, lo and behold, who appeared at the investor day was Tom Zhu. I was actually looking to see whether he would appear, and he did. And I think it was the first time that really people got to see this guy talking. And if you had seen the live stream, the way he talked is I feel like even similar to Elon, although personality-wise, he's completely different person than Elon. I mean, right? He's low key,
Right.
but I think he answered those questions pretty perfectly. I think,
Yeah.
right? He said if as long as you offer a valuable and affordable product, you don't have to worry about demand, right? So that's what he said. And then some of the manufacturing stuff and then geopolitical stuff, he said we can't control it, but we got to do, we support the local economy, stuff like that. It's pretty, he dodged the questions well. That's what I want to say.
The one thing that I did really try to key in on was a couple of the sections that, especially what you were talking about, because the head of manufacturing came out and he had said we let data drive our decisions, right? So they're informed. For instance,
Yeah.
they found out people don't use a sunroof, so they took it out. And
yeah,
this is antithema to legacy auto. They want to add features to add price. And so this is again a different way of thinking if you're legacy auto, and it's foreign. It is a foreign language to them. And so that's also why I thought they should get their moleskins out and take notes, because in a world where Elon's talking about selling 10 products, 2 million each by 2030, and they're talking about decontenting a car to get to that point, as opposed to adding features to add margin. And their margin is going to come from the services that they're going to sell. And they're the only credible entity currently in the automotive space that is capable of selling a service, right? They can sell a service and not even give it to somebody yet, right?
Yeah, that was what Mercedes was trying to do 2 weeks ago. So, right.
Well, and Volkswagen had just launched the App Store. Cariat did. So, yeah.
On the Audi first, yeah. So basically, to summarize yesterday's event, if we look at that 50% reduction, I think that was basically an announcement to the world that we're gonna cut prices again without telling you we're gonna cut prices, right? That's basically it. And welcome to compete with us, kind of like that.
And the announcement of the Model 2 is more of like an ASAP, as soon as possible.
Well, I think it was smart that they did not announce it. It was kind of, I think people were looking for, one more thing type of thing, right? But it did not come. But I think it was good because I think you want to give it a little bit more time because you had just reduced prices, right? You don't want to err customers.
And say what you will about Elon being polarizing. In 5 years' time, he's not going to be CEO. But if they can build a nice, affordable electric vehicle, nobody's going to care that Elon was the CEO or Tesla's this polarizing company. I believe that Tesla will sell as many $25,000 Model 2s as it can build come 2, 3, 4 years when it launches. So regardless of how polarizing currently the brand and the CEO is. So the legacies really need to get their cost structure in check right now. Otherwise, you just said it. Tesla's going to play with pricing all day long in order to gain share, right?
Yeah. And I think Tesla obviously has its problems, whether it's this, this FSD thing, whether it's some of the quality issues. But when it comes to kind of manufacturing, cost, operational efficiency aspect of it, I don't think everybody's looking up to Tesla. That's what they showed, basically.
Let's qualify that by saying at 1.5 million units, because they're going to run into manufacturing hell again at 2, 3, 4 million units, at 8, 9 million units, at 10, 12 million units. Because the fact of the matter is, Lei, if they get to 25,000, they're going to have to build that factory, multiple factories in South Asia or China, along with Mexico. So those are going to create several challenges, not just for manufacturing, but for sourcing and for tariffs. And so we don't want to oversimplify their path to 20 million because there's a lot of roadblocks that could be put in their place that has nothing to do with their efficiency and their manufacturing excellence. Okay.
And then the other big part about this whole sustainable world whatever, right? These $10 trillion or
Yeah.
how many petawatt hours.
He threw out such huge numbers, huh?
Yeah, I think this is more of just in Chinese. It's called drawing a pie, 画饼, which means right. You put that out there, but it's probably is superficial at the beginning, but then it's going to take a number of years to do, and it's probably not going to be that easy.
You made me think of dinner last night because my youngest loves the bing, right? Like the pancake. And so my wife went to the Chinese store and bought some of those frozen ones and then fried it with him. So
Yeah,
not same, but same. So
yeah. I think yeah. So I think it was got a good chance to see Tom Zhu and his kind of
let
style.
me ask you this, Lei.
Yeah.
20 million units by 2030. What's the market? What's the percentage of that 20 million that comes from China in Europe?
Oh, just cut it in half. That'll be my
You think it's 50?
yeah 50% out of Shanghai.
And that's why I don't think it's going to be that high, but that's why it's not going to be easy for them.
Correct.
Because you and I believe that at least 30 to 40% has to come from China. At least.
It's interesting that what Tom Zhu said at the very end of answering the question on the China-U.S. relationship, he said, as long as we're needed in the country,
Yeah.
we'll be fine. That sounded a little interesting.
Exactly, because just this week, the Global Times clapped back at Elon for retweeting some of that COVID stuff.
Yeah. So
And you and I have always said this. Chinese government needs Tesla right now. That might not be the case in 5, 7, 10 years. But in Tesla's defense, I tweeted when I saw that first announcement about the Mexico Gigafactory or the Monterrey Giga. I said, initial thoughts, trying to mitigate risk from Shanghai Giga. And that leads me to believe that in the next 20 to 30 months, Model 2 is going to be launched. So those are the two kind of initial thoughts that I had when I saw Monterrey Giga, because if they have any sort of relationship challenges with the Chinese government, Mexico needs to make up for that because of the cost, right? And the other counterbalance would probably be a South Asia in India or a Southeast Asian presence, a major presence. Okay.
yeah, so it might have been disappointing. I didn't think it was overwhelming, but they're on a path that people will look up to. So they still, like what you say in the newsletter that we debated about, that Tesla still dictate certain things, if not a lot of things. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the way I put it.
So he says things so matter of factly that they don't seem as shocking as they should be. $175 billion worth of investment. I mean, that's just a massive number. 20 million by 2030. And so these numbers are mind-boggling, dude. So but how he says them, it's like ho hum. But
yeah, and he's saying one question was how many models. He said less than 10 to achieve that 20 million.
Yeah,
and he's like it's like phones, right? You don't need that many different phones now on the market. It's anyways.
And remember that it's always the 80-20 rule. So that means 16, 17 million would come from less than 3 or 4 models of sales if they get to 20 million by 2030.
Yeah.
So we always talked about this high runners, right? And then remember when we started this podcast, what I said in the podcast was Tesla would sell cars at cost to get more of them on the road. And that's effectively what we're seeing or what they're talking about doing. So what's next?
So we can talk about Luminar Day a little bit because we had 2 straight days of these 2 companies doing kind of, you call it a day of investor day or something else, but both are deep dives. I thought the Luminar Day was, I learned a lot, had a lot of substance.
Okay.
Really, because the way I described to the Luminar people was, I think this is the first time that a LiDAR company has said so much about what can be said and said a lot about what cannot be said. And what I mean is when we talk about LiDARs, they throw out these details as to their future, cost, unit cost, what they expect in terms of revenues per LiDAR, their annual number of vehicles they expect to be equipped with LiDARs, Luminar LiDARs. They expect 26, 27, around that time frame, they'll get to 1 million units a year annual with Luminar LiDARs. In 2030, 5 million. These humongous numbers. And what I did not expect was actually Tom Fenimore, the CFO, spent a considerable time discussing their China strategy. And at the very beginning, he said China is our most important market.
And Tom should know because his background's China.
Yes.
He has a strong background.
Tom will be our upcoming Max episode guest. I recorded a conversation with him.
他可以学中文吗?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
He spent 2010, 11, 12, those 3 years in Beijing. He started a family there. I think he meant maybe they had a children there. But he was the Goldman Sachs responsible for industrial side of things, covering the China market. And he had the exposure to the automotive side of things then. So this was more than a decade ago. And basically, he talked about, I'm referring to the Luminar Day, not our conversation, but first, China is the most important market. And he also basically answered the question that we had last episode on Mercedes using the Luminar on their next generation vehicles with higher speeds of L3, right? That does cover globally, so including China. And their interesting view or perspective on China is that in the presentations, he basically talked about the current market landscape. So 20 million passenger vehicles, 50% Chinese brands, 50% foreign brands. And of the 50% Chinese brands, he put in a bucket of 3.5 million that's accounted by either BYD or these very upcoming EV startups like NIO.
Mostly BYD.
Yeah. Well, the leading ones, at least,
Yeah.
the market leaders. Of that 3.5 million, he said a third are priced above 250,000 RMB.
A third?
And I'm thinking those are all EVs. So, and he's saying that Luminar is targeting that market. So a third of 3.5 million, let's say 1.2-ish million, that are priced above 250,000 RMB that they will target.
Is he implying that Luminar is primarily premium market then?
Yes, they start out with premium. This is what Austin talked about. Number one, they start out on premium vehicles. So that's why we have the Mercedes,
right,
Volvo, Polestar.
Well, and then on 250 and above, right? I think that's...
Yeah, the Rising Auto, right? Those are considered. And then the strategic investment into eCarX, which is a Geely US recently listed company, and also now working with Pony AI on the autonomous trucking.
This is a very, what's that? A very smart, smooth move for Luminar to invest in eCarX because it gives them access to 1.3 million cars last year Geely sold.
He talked about that. I asked him about that in an interview, but he's basically alluding that look at their current customers. Who is the umbrella above Mercedes, Volvo, Polestar?
Yeah, it's a shrewd move. That's what I meant to say. Shrewd move.
It's Geely.
Yes.
So Geely could be a huge potential kind of their customer, right? And that he's hired a China CEO that came from Harman Schaeffler. So they already set up a legal entity. I think they plan to do something at the Shanghai Auto Show. And I get the sense that they think that even if Hesai got the Rising Auto win, they seem to think that the 50% foreign, so which includes Mercedes, they already have a huge volume there. And yeah, so a lot of China stuff.
The risk here, Lei, is that the U.S. government is going to make them take sides because LiDAR it collects data.
Yep. we talked about that in the pod as well. So stay tuned. They just have to do things like Mercedes, AMAP, Tencent Cloud versus Google, right? These type of things. Like,
Well, no, they're going to have to use ECARX, right? They're not going to
yeah,
use.
yeah, yeah. So I think what I was impressed with is that they also moving into they established a Luminar semiconductor and a insurance business. So they made a lot of strategic moves that the industry may not understand, but I feel like these are very important moves. Even investment into ECARX, I think they're important and smart moves.
Completely agree, but their internal risk management teams need to really stay in front of
Yeah,
the US China relationship because this week they had that House Select Committee on US China relations, and they're going to do another committee on COVID origins because the Republicans have taken over the House. So my friend Bill Bishop said that in his adult life, he's never seen the relationship any worse. And so it, I'm a bit torn, right? Because
yeah.
my family is half, my wife is Chinese American. She's torn. She's probably feels like you a little bit.
So I'm going to do the in-person visa application tomorrow. So wish me luck.
Yes, good luck with that.
In New York City.
你
So
你会说中文还是英文？ You gonna speak English or
都
Chinese?
可以，都可以
Okay.
both.
So yeah, yeah. Anyways, it's just a difficult thing to talk about.
it gave me I think you're gonna probably start to see other Chinese lidar companies doing similar events because it gave me a different perspectives because in the China space they just talk about, oh, Hesai got the win, so Luminar is lost to the SAIC. The other thing they also alluded that they want to build a plant in Asia, but you and I know where in Asia exactly, right? So
The other thing too is that Luminar is a startup, right? And so I think that they'll be surprised how cutthroat this competition in China is going to be.
yeah,
And although they have lofty goals of 1 million and 5 million, they can't get to those numbers without the China market. And Hesai and Innovusion and these other guys are not going to let them grab share from the domestic market so easily. Okay.
luckily they do have these global wins, so hopefully that'll translate to some volumes in China.
Yeah. I think it helps them from a positioning and brand equity standpoint with Mercedes, but it doesn't really help them from a volume standpoint because Mercedes is, a couple million units a year in globally, right?
So stay tuned for that conversation. I think I asked all of the pertinent questions on manufacturing, the U.S. Chinese lidar competition. So
And the one thing that's really cool about most of our past Max episode guests is that they have a pretty good understanding of China
yes,
because they've lived there, they've experienced it. So I think because you and I ask probing questions and we can easily see through someone that can't answer 3 levels deep into a China topic.
yeah.
So I think it's an important thing to note because Hesai is going to come and they're partnering with American automakers and European automakers. So
At least they plan to. Yes.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It might not be that the Chinese government scrutinizes Luminar, but it might be the foreign governments that scrutinize these Chinese lidar companies, and then the Chinese government basically does a tit for tat.
Yeah.
That's kind of the real danger.
And then I learned 2 facts. So Luminar is based. They're right next to UCF, and I didn't know this. UCF is the largest university in the U.S. I did not know that.
Really? No way.
Yes.
No, it can't be.
There was a local guy. He was sitting next to me. He told me this.
No, well,
So
if you were in Austin, Texas, that UT Austin guy would be like, "We're the largest university."
okay.
And then if
you're
in Columbus, Ohio, they would tell you the exact same thing.
And one of the founders, I think his name was Jason, he said that's one of the reasons why Luminar started there. And the other reason, because that region where UCF is, near Orlando, has the largest cluster of defense contractors.
Hmm.
So a lot of talent in that area. And also the DARPA challenge, I think the idea or came out of that area, region. So that's why they're there.
And for the folks that don't know what DARPA is, it's the defensive something. It's the government agency that funds moonshots and competitions for technology and defense. And they famously sponsored the or funded the Grand Challenge, which was the birth of the modern autonomous vehicle, of which LiDAR was introduced in
Yeah.
year 2 of the competition by what would become Velodyne. And so that's why the DARPA Grand Challenge in autonomous vehicles has become such an important role, played in such an important role in the creation and nurturing of LiDAR. So
that was good. We can move on to maybe we combine the February sales and Li Auto, NIO, that they both announced earnings earlier this week. I don't know what'd you think about sales, EV sales? Any panic buttons to bring out?
So Leap Motor is still worrying me.
Yeah.
I still think Neta is selling a lot to fleet.
Uh-huh.
Li Auto will need to get to 22,000 units in March to hit their 55,000 for Q1. So that'll be an important milestone for them to get over 20,000. And, NIO is chugging along at 12 and change. I'd like to see them get it. Like, meaning instead of let's see 14,000 next month, let's see 17,000 or 18,000, because that will tell me that they finally get the manufacturing part or the operations part.
For NIO, Q1 will be tough because March is not going to be that high. March is probably only around similar to February, which was a little bit over 12,000.
The one thing that I noticed about NIO, and I didn't mean to interrupt, sorry, but that their Q4 numbers were lower. One of the reasons they cited was because they got canceled orders on older models.
Margins. Yeah, that was a huge. I think both NIO and Tesla shares dropped after their respective announcements, but they dropped for different reasons, right? So Tesla dropped because everybody was looking for that
Model 2 intro.
Yeah, Model 2 or Q. But NIO was that this huge hit on gross margins into like low single digits compared to like double digits, right? So that was, even though, I mean, they lost for 2022, if I remember correctly, they lost over 14 billion RMB.
Yeah.
That's $2 billion, right? And Ford lost $2 billion 2022. So, and NIO is still investing into 1,000 swap stations, phones, new brands.
Yeah, so their R&D numbers are off the charts and still growing.
And despite all of that, Li Bin is confident on getting to 30K run rate per month and achieving break even in Q4. At least the NIO brand, the maybe not the overall company, but
I believe he believes that they can get to 30,000, but I want to see operational efficiencies. That's what I want to see, because I think demand side, they could get to 30,000.
Yeah, and also he grouped those models into buckets, right? So the ET5, the ET5 Touring, and the ES6 is what he calls the volume driver bucket. And then the
high runners,
C,
aka high runners.
Yeah, high runners. And then the EC6 and EC7, so the coupes are the other extreme, and then right in the middle,
more niche.
Yeah, in the middle are the ET7, ES8, those models.
Those are more the Halo SUV and sedans.
And then he was talking about this switching to all the models to NT 2.0. There were some issues. Yeah, so I agree that you and I are still looking for that breakthrough or moment where, okay, NIO has reached that next level. So in comparison, I think Li Auto is relatively has the most tailwind going forward among the big three. Li Xiang also talked about 30,000 units, right? They plan to reach that run rate in Q2, April or May. And he gave out a projection that they want to win 20% of the 300,000 to 500,000 RMB SUV market this year, which he expected to be 1.4 to 1.5 million. So 20% of that, you do the math, right? And he was at another event where he said by 2027, they want to take up 35% of the passenger vehicle market, everything, including SUVs, that are priced above 200,000 RMB.
Now homeboy's just being silly.
Yeah. Remember that 1.6 million that they want to do in 2025,
Yes.
right?
Yes, he's being silly.
20% of the 8 million whatever segment that he talked about, SUVs.
That's almost like an Elon statement or the Tesla statement about spending 175 billion on increasing capacity, because
that means they have to double. Let's say they do 300,000 this year. They have to double the rest of the way to get to that.
And not have any hiccups.
Right. And then Xpeng, I don't know. Xpeng they've been quiet.
Yeah, if we're keeping score, Li Auto is at $25.5 billion market cap. NIO is at about a $15 billion market cap, and Xpeng is at around an $8 billion market cap. So Xpeng needs a hug. And hopefully we will see a more energized, efficient, better lineup from Xpeng in the second half of 2023. And this quietness hopefully means that they're head down, grinding it out. And because I don't know if any of their cars are selling that well currently. So
I think for all these smart EV startups, you kind of see this play out, that how quickly the models can fall out of favor. The Li One is a classic example. Even NIO, some of the NIO.
That's the whole point that I was trying to make, the Q4, how the orders, because you can't count on month to month. The finicky customer, if they see a new product, they're like, you know what, I'm just going to do this one instead.
Yeah. And how much of the Tesla price reduction has affected this, we don't know. But
in that price reduction for Tesla, the effect is not created equal. Some brands are going to be affected more by it than others in the China market.
Yeah, so, you saw Leapmotor, they launched all new versions of all of their models, I think equipped with the CALB batteries. I think NIO is also launching models with CALB, so different supplier than CATL.
That tells me that there's some trust issues potentially, and or CATL is not being as flexible as they need to be to some of these customers.
But CATL has announced their own kind of price cuts to certain customers, right? To select.
If they sign an LTA or a long-term agreement,
yeah.
A 2-year contract, effectively.
Yeah.
And so there's ways to attract these customers, but at the end of the day, innovative, effective, and cost is at the right price. So my wife is with my son in Lansing. They're visiting the capital, and so in about 10 minutes, I need to go pick up my son at the bus stop. So.
Okay, daddy duties.
Yes.
Yeah, but, I think we covered lots of things in 40 minutes. So.
Yeah. The let me look at my newsletter to see if there's anything that I wanted to bring up.
Oh, I think Polestar just announced that their numbers for Q4.
Okay.
And they plan to do 80,000 this year. Last year was over 50,000.
If nothing else, thank you for joining, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
That was a very efficient show today. All right. Talk to you all next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, If you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.